I watched The Fall of the House of Murdoch on Fox Nation, and it left me with such an icky feeling that I just had to sit down and have my say. I already had reservations about it because of hearing how they got Alex's statements illegally through Jim Griffin, which wasn't really surprising, but I wanted to hear Buster's interview. So for those of you who didn't watch or don't have the streaming service, it was basically the same story told again, with a splash of family videos, pictures, descriptions of a loving, happy family, and a few statements read out by Alex, which were the cause of his losing his phone and tablet privileges. I want to eventually cover the whole series, but for now, I want to focus on one line that Alex said. He said,
I am convinced more than ever that if I had not lied, I would not be here.
And the second thing I want to focus on is that on Tuesday, September 5th, Dick and Jim will be holding a press conference to say that the jury was basically tampered with by outside influence. How much did Fox Nation pay them, I wonder, that now they're bouncing back into work mode, on the case, holding press conferences? Fair warning, this episode comes with my theories and my opinion being strongly expressed. I also want to announce a trigger warning. My channel usually focuses on financial crimes and legal documents, not the murders. But this one is all about the murders, so please don't watch if you're not comfortable with that. It's just that I strongly disagree with both the notion that the jury found him guilty for either of the reasons that they said. They found him guilty because he is guilty. With that said, let's get started. Hey everyone, this is Cassidy O'Connell, and I'm calling this episode, Did Alex Have Time to Commit the Murders? Cassidy's Closing Arguments, because that's what I felt like I was doing as I prepared this. Welcome. What disturbed me the most about this documentary is the obvious slant towards sympathizing with Alex. They released it enough time after the trial that people have forgotten a lot of the details that came out in the trial. They added interviews of Creighton Waters, Dr. Kenny Kinsey, people we just absolutely loved, and I appreciated seeing their contributions. But besides that, there was an underlying tug in Alex's direction. At least I felt it. It's easier to convince people when the facts are murky, thus waiting until now. As I mentioned, they also piled on the family pictures and videos to stir some emotions. Most of the pictures of Paul were of him very young because naturally human beings see a child and feel a sense of innocence. They left out the fact that most pictures of Paul ever taken are him drunk off his bum being outrageous. They left out all the pictures of the family sitting around getting absolutely wasted together as Alex and Maggie provided all the minors in their home with as much liquor as their bodies could hold. There were no pictures or videos of the multiple crashes that Paul had, any of which could have been fatal both to him and to those who were with him. And Alex and Maggie promptly covered those up. There was no mention of Alex at parties where allegedly escorts were provided and that he beat and choked his escort multiple times according to her. A lot was made of the fact that the time period between the murder and him leaving for his parents' home was very short, so that's mainly what I want to address here today. As I said, time has passed. Details have been forgotten. I had to go back and watch hours of testimony and closing arguments again. Was there enough time? We're going to get into that. But are we really going to underestimate a man who successfully hid stealing millions of dollars from his clients with no suspicions from his clients, no suspicions from his family, his law firm, the courts, judges, literally everyone that knew him? A man who devised a whole scheme with a fake forge account that checks could simply be issued straight out of insurance companies, law firms, and the banks would simply cash them. We're not talking about an ordinary Joe Schmo who in a complete state of panic stands there wondering what to do next. We're talking about a calculated, conniving deviant who has no limits to what he'll do to serve himself. We also tend to want to attribute our own consciences, morals, and empathies onto others in these situations. And I don't know about you, but sometimes we find it hard to imagine that they don't have these feelings in their very core being. But sometimes people are born without those things, or they lose them through a lifetime of committing progressively horrible acts on others until any goodness, morality, or empathy are simply gone. We also have to remember the bloodline he comes from. Alex didn't just find an opportunity to steal something that was right in front of him that no one would notice. He devised plans. They were well thought out plans. Alex didn't just live in quick moments of desperate moves, although he did have those. He had several businesses that he was using to do tricky things about his money already. Then he thought of Forge. He executed that not once, but after losing the first account for being overdrawn, he set up a second. He studied which loans he could use from the bank, such as the farm loan, something that the government provides that's available to help people who provide our food because the government recognizes that farming is very difficult in our times. He did that to get himself out of trouble. When the Plyler girls came of age and he no longer had their account to dip into every time he ran low on money. Gloria had no sooner fallen when, as he admits now, that he immediately thought of how to make the most of it, said it was his dogs. He approached Gloria's boys at their mother's funeral and put every tiny detail of his plan to make millions off of them. The way he acquired Moselle from Barrett Bulwer for $5. The way he sold Moselle to Maggie for $5. The way he displayed his badge at the hospital after the boat crash. All of the things we've seen, and probably a million things unseen, that he carried out in his life to serve himself and only himself. Alex knew how to plot and how to carry out a plot. Are we really going to underestimate him after over 10 years into his sneaky, plotting behavior and think that he'd show up to a murder unprepared? I'll do a separate video that talks about motive. A lot was made of that in the trial as well, with Creighton insinuating he was a family annihilator. But we'll save all that for another video. But for a number of reasons, that day was kind of a culmination of a lot of things. He did say at one point that he felt that the person who committed the murders had thought about it for a long time. I agree with that, and he would know because he was the one thinking about it. So with that in mind, let's get back to this short time period between the murders and him leaving for his mom's house. This is what they were alluding to in the series. They're saying there simply wasn't enough time for him to have washed off his blood and to have done everything he had to do to clean up the murder scene and get to his mom's. So that's what we're addressing today. They said it simply takes too long to wash blood off. But what if there was nothing to wash off? What if, knowing what you were about to do, you had something there ready? Alex was a hunter. He had hunting gear. Alex had his skinning shed. I'm sure he had coveralls to wear in that skinning shed. He was home early on the property with Paul. He could have put that protective gear there with the guns and bags to discard it all in after. Maybe they were waiting on the golf cart they drove down to the kennels that night. Whatever the planning involved, he was ready. This wasn't spur of the moment. We heard that he called Maggie to come home to go visit his parents, yet he didn't take her. It was all part of the plan, getting them there and getting everything ready. The actual shooting was no doubt under a minute. He would have already been in his gear. Adrenaline rushing would have made him faster. How long does it take to check their bodies a few yards away from each other, to check Paul's phone, to grab Maggie's phone because you're going to need that later, and of course, you've already planned that? How long does it take to pull off a ski mask, gloves, and step out of hunting gear? Also, under a minute. Throw it in a bag that you have ready. Load that bag and the guns into the cart. Less than a minute. A quick drive back up to the house where he left his phone that he now grabs up as he runs around in frantic steps that his phone is tracking, checking himself in the mirror to make sure he didn't miss any splatter, talking to himself, repeating the plan, setting up his alibi, going over his checklist, maybe even crying a little. None of these things take as long as they're trying to pretend they did. Like a puzzle, we keep looking at the picture on the box while we put the pieces together. If we just focus on one puzzle piece that we can't make fit, we waste time. Sometimes we group all the pink pieces together and get frustrated when we can't make them fit. But then we look at the box and we realize there are several places on the picture that have pink. We can't force them all together. They're from different parts. We can't get caught up on one little detail, but always have to look at the entire picture and keep asking, does this theory make sense? Or is there a better one? How far-fetched is it that someone else, or at least two people as defense claims, is just lurking, just waiting for a moment? Somehow they know that on that day, Maggie and Paul are going to be left alone at the kennels at just that moment. They come to kill them, but they don't bring their own weapons because somehow they just know that there will be guns for each of them and that those guns will be fully loaded. The time of death is established, so we have to make this theory fit that time frame. Minutes after Alex claims he leaves the kennel but is still at the house, these strangers appear. The dogs never detected them when Alex was there. Even though the property's huge, it would have taken them some time to get to the kennels, and during that time, I put to you, the dogs would have been going crazy if they heard strangers out there approaching in the dark, as we know dogs can do, especially trained hunting dogs. Now Alex, who says he left right after the Bubba fiasco, went back up to the house, napped, and then left the house shortly after 9. Claims he didn't hear any shots and just goes about his business. A longtime hunter doesn't recognize his own family guns being fired over and over, 2 to Paul, 5 to Maggie, 1 missed. Nope, he's just up there texting, calling Maggie, wondering why she's not answering, out by his car for several of these minutes, but he doesn't hear it. Just trying to call Maggie, she's not answering, text her, I'm going to mom's, doesn't hear any shots. Let's talk for a moment about these 2 strangers who were seeking revenge for the boat crash, killing Maggie and Paul, but leaving Alex alive? Alex, who kept Paul out of trouble? Alex, who let Paul drink? Alex, who raised him wild? Alex, who was making sure that Paul had a well-known law team protecting him? They watch Alex drive off and just let him go? He's off on country roads driving alone and they just let him go? But before I get carried away again, like I said, it's been a while since the trial. We've forgotten a lot of details, so let's refresh. For this, I'm using the Murdaugh Murders timeline of events that was prepared by SLED and presented at the trial by Agent Peter Rudovsky. The full timeline starts in the morning. The condensed timeline, which I'll be referring to the most, that's the one that was used in court. It starts at 6:04, but I'm still not even going to go back that far. We all saw in the court testimony that Alex and Paul met up at the house before Maggie, that they went around the property addressing some sunflowers that had been killed. It was a large property with a lot of upkeep, and they were busy doing that. Blanca had prepared and left dinner for them, and Maggie was coming back. She was originally going to spend that night in Edisto having workers coming there, but she came back because Alex asked her to. But first, she had a dentist appointment, so she gets there later. We see her making phone calls, we see her getting her nails done, and she's just on her way home. At 7:39, Paul records the video of Alex by the tree that's falling over. We know that's the time because it shows up on his phone. It shows up as a little thumbnail that's when the video was created. It's another piece of evidence from the trial that's important because these are not the clothes that Alex is found in later, and they are never seen again. When Blanca shows up the next day, they're not in the laundry, and Alex is clearly seen in a white t-shirt and shorts when law enforcement arrives the night of the murder. It's also not the clothes that he wore to work. At 7:50, for some reason, Maggie's phone gives its last location data information. I don't recall ever hearing this being explained, but unfortunately, we never see her location again. 6 minutes later, at 7:56, Paul arrives at the caretaker house on the property and finally posts the Snapchat video that he recorded earlier. They've said that the signal is bad on most of the property, but there is Wi-Fi at the house and at the caretaker house, which is probably why it takes that long for it to show up. At 8:05, Alex's phone registers 54 steps, which would be him walking in from the cart that he's been riding around the property. And he comes inside where he puts his phone down and doesn't pick it up again until after the murders. Maggie unplugs her phone from her car at 8:17 and takes 38 steps into her home. She obviously puts it down since it doesn't register any steps for a while. Paul arrives 2 minutes later at 8:19 where we see his phone connect to the Wi-Fi. They quickly eat the dinner that Blanca had left for them, and then at 8:30, Maggie's phone is on the move again. She takes 43 steps, which is very close to the 38 steps she took to come in. So obviously this is her walking out to the cart that's parked near her car. Alex's phone, as mentioned, is apparently left at home. Phones don't register steps when you're riding along and they're sitting still in your lap or your pocket or your bag. So though they're riding to the kennels, it doesn't show any steps. At 8:31, still on the way, Maggie gets a text from the family chat that she looks at for 3 seconds and locks her phone again without responding. At 8:32, Paul registers 283 steps, so he appears to have walked to the kennels. Probably one of the biggest things we remember from the trial, because it was the most explosive thing that happened in the trial, is that Alex had been lying since the night of the murders, saying that he never went to the kennels that night. In the extraction of Paul's phone, a video was discovered, and who can forget hearing Alex's voice played several times with different people being asked to identify the voice they heard on the recording, all of whom say, "It's Alex."
Get back! Get back! Quit, Cash. Come on. Quit. That's okay. Come here. It's not bad. Come here, Cash. Shit. Come here. Post it. Cash.
Hey, he's got a bird in his mouth. Bubba.
Hey, Bubba.
That's a guinea.
This is a chicken.
Come here, Bubba.
Come here, Cash.
Come here, Bubba.
Cash. Quit.
Now earlier, when he was being questioned by police and was told of this, he still denied it. But now during trial, as it's played aloud in court, it's so easily recognizably Alex. If you didn't see it or if you forgot that, Paul was keeping his friend Rogan's dogs at the kennel, and the dog Cash had something wrong with his tail. Paul was trying unsuccessfully to send a FaceTime video to Rogan to show him the tail, but he just didn't have a good enough signal. Rogan asked Paul to just take a video and send it to him later. Alex was not aware that Paul had recorded the video and thought that he could get away with saying that he wasn't there, which is the very reason he left his phone back up at the house so that later he could say, "I wasn't there. I was at the house." But after hearing his voice and it being identified multiple times, he later had to testify that he had indeed lied about being there at the kennels. And this was a huge turning point in the trial and the biggest piece of evidence that led to the jury's guilty verdict. I'd like to issue another trigger warning here, as I'm about to give my theory on how it went down that night, and it includes murder and details of murder. As we well know, this case is about murder, but I struggled while making it because of the content, and I certainly don't want to upset any of you. So if you feel uncomfortable hearing about a murder, please click off now, as I will be describing the scene as I see it playing out. Take care of your well-being first. Another note, where we see the calls that don't show up in this document, they were manually deleted by Alex. They were not lost as time passed on because there are calls from months before the murder that still show up. These are manual deletes. They don't make sense, but neither does killing your family. I'm going to separate these into 3 timelines. First, I'm going to start with Paul's timeline, and we're using phone data for this. Here we see the property overview. The structure at the bottom left is the Moselle main building home, and the top area with the red signal around it is the kennels. It's showing red, showing that that is the location data for Paul's phone. And this is the final location for Paul's phone. His steps effectively end at 8:42, and his phone activity shows that he was in the kennel with the dog, attempting to hold him steady for pictures, trying to FaceTime Rogan, as I mentioned, and ultimately opting to video the dog instead at 8:44:55. And that's why he's not registering steps. He's standing pretty still in the kennel. He has 4 minutes left to live. The video isn't long, and it ends at 8:45. There's no activity on his phone for 2 minutes, which is probably the time they were getting Bubba back in the kennel, since we hear at the end of the video that Bubba has grabbed a chicken and they're trying to catch him. Since his phone doesn't register steps, he may have put the phone down to go help his parents, or he may have just watched his parents do it and stayed in the kennel. But at 8:47:55, he picks up messaging with a Megan Kimbrell. The messages are continued from an earlier conversation he had with her at dinner, and they start coming steady again, 10 seconds apart, then 24 seconds apart. 27 seconds later, the light comes on, but nothing happens. The time? 8:48:58. The animation you're about to see is created by Asget Industries on TikTok. I have rearranged it because I have a different theory of how it went. I used a combination of several of her videos put together in the order I think it happened. Did Alex make up an excuse to send Paul into the feed shed? Hey Paul, could you go get the whatever from the feed shed real quick? So Paul is now in the feed shed, which is right next to the kennels. He's standing sideways. He's picked up his phone, read a message, and was probably preparing an answer, completely engrossed in his phone. As his dad steps into the shed, his body didn't turn, according to the pathologist. Did he turn his head and look at his father? We don't know. We know Alex stepped into the shed because of where the casings fell. If he did turn his head, he would have seen his father pointing a gun at him. An explosion of fire, searing pain, the reflex to flee to safety because his mind can't make sense out of what is happening. Though the shooter just stepped outside the door, he heads for the door. Sadly enough, his instinct defies what he saw and urges him to go out to where his parents are, thinking he'll be safer there. It has to be a mistake, right? He sees Maggie at the cart. Her face is confused. She's heard a gunshot. She sees Alex, but she doesn't see Paul. She's wondering what's just happened. Maybe they make eye contact. He looks at his mom and thinks my mom will save me. As he starts to exit the door, he sees his dad. It's not a mistake. Alex, who's just about to switch out guns, is surprised to see Paul's head poke out the door. His hand goes back to the trigger. It's not a mistake. My dad is shooting me. My dad is trying to kill me. His last conscious thought as another blast hits and all life, breath, and awareness leave his body as it falls to the ground. Did it take long? No, we're talking seconds here. Maggie's timeline. Maggie's phone registered no steps once she walked out to the cart, so presumably she left it in the cart as she did whatever she was doing at the kennels. We hear her holler about Bubba having a bird in his mouth, so we expect that after the video she and Alex caught and dealt with Bubba relatively quickly, since, as mentioned, Paul went straight back to texting in less than 3 minutes. Maggie's phone has sat quietly untouched since she read the text message shortly after leaving the house. Her screen has reacted a few times, and the agent explained these are from apps running in the background. But something happens at 8:49:20. Her screen comes on. It's not just a backlight on notification. It actually unlocks. The report mentions a text notification, but unlike all the other text notifications in the report, it doesn't say who it's from or what the message says, so I'm not sure that she even actually opened the text. Had Alex sent her to check now that Bubba was dealt with and he was about to carry out his plan? Paul, go get the whatever from the feed shed. Maggie, I forgot my phone. Can you check your messages real quick and see if there's anything about Dad? That gives him the seconds that he needs to put on his protective gear and grab his guns that he's already left there earlier in the day. As she opens her phone, standing by the cart where she'd left her phone, she hears a shot. It startles her, and she looks up to see Paul start to step out of the shed, and Alex inexplicably shoots him in the head. There was a line that was repeated in the trial that she was running to her baby. But there are two facts that make it hard for me to understand that theory. One, she turned on her phone that had been left in the cart. So I think she was right there at the cart. Two, she had a tire tread mark on the back of her leg from the cart. If she was further away and came running to Paul, how would she have gotten that tire mark on her leg if she'd started somewhere further than the cart? When would her leg have made contact with that tire? In my theory, she's gone to the cart, is facing it as she reaches in to grab her phone, but she hears a gunshot, so quickly turns around. She watches Alex kill Paul. He puts that rifle down and reaches for another one. Even more bewildering, he's coming towards her. He raises the gun. This can't be happening. She backs up, forgetting the cart is right behind her, smacking the back of her left leg into the cart. Alex starts to fire, and the shots just keep coming from there. One shot, bullet hits the gravel. This is really happening. He's going to shoot me too. She's backing up, afraid to turn her back to him. Surely she can talk him out of this. Alex, what are you doing? Second shot, her wrist. Third shot, her thigh. Burning pain in her wrist and leg. She feels the blood drip down the back of her leg. Alex, stop! Fourth shot, excruciating pain exploding through her insides. She drops the phone, drops to the ground. The shots stop for just a moment as his feet scurry around her. For a moment, she mistakenly thinks he's coming to help her. This is all some big mistake. Then, searing pain comes up through her belly, her breast, and she's gone too. From Paul's first shot to Maggie's last, it's all over in less than a minute. Alex's timeline. Alex, the man who was known to always have his phone, using it even during meetings with clients or fellow lawyers, the man whose father was in the hospital very sick, his mother who has dementia and was reportedly not doing well with her husband not at home, but Alex leaves for the kennels, leaving his phone behind. Why? Because only he knows what's in store for tonight. Now, I'll stress here, but I will talk about this more in the motive video. I believe there was love in this family. I believe he loved her. I believe he loved Paul. I believe he loves Buster. But that has nothing to do with why he committed these murders. I picture him extra jovial that evening, trying to keep suspicions low, making his family happy during what only he knows will be their last evening alive. As they drove to the kennels, did he tell her he loves her? He had her full attention since she got home, as we see she hadn't touched her phone except for checking one message that she didn't even respond to on the drive to the kennels. Maybe she even started to feel happy that she'd come after all, because we heard her sister and Blanca both say in testimony that Maggie didn't really want to go back that night. Did he smile at her in this special way between them? Did he put his arm around her, make her feel safe, make her feel loved, happy even? When we hear her say, "Bubba's got a bird in his mouth," though she said it loudly, it sounded shocked, a little amused, but it didn't sound angry or stressed out. When someone's in a bad mood, we hear a lot of anger in their voice, especially if it's raised. But hers didn't sound that way. Alex, on the other hand, sounded aggravated, mad even. He had a plan, and Bubba was potentially messing up his plan. He needed everyone calm and happy and unsuspecting, and he needed to do it quickly. By Paul's timeline, it's probably safe to assume that Bubba had been dealt with by 8:47 when he resumed texting. That gives Alex just under 2 minutes to slip into his coveralls, hunting clothes, or whatever protective gear he used, Paul was busy getting whatever he'd sent him to the feed shed to get. Alex had probably sent Maggie to check her phone to ensure she didn't come up on him while he was changing and ruin the plan. Covered up, he steps in the doorway, looks at his son, raises his weapon, shoots, and steps outside. He thinks he's done. Now, he's got to switch guns to create that theory of 2 killers that he's already planned. The second gun is leaned against the wall, just outside. As he's lowering the first gun to the ground, he's startled by Paul, who's about to step out of the shed. He's not dead. He hears Maggie's voice from the cart. His plan is getting messed up, but he can't stop now. As Maggie screams Paul's name, Alex fires another shot into Paul's head. He hadn't wanted to actually see this. He'd fired a quick shot into Paul and stepped away immediately, thinking he'd die in the shed. But now, he's had to watch parts of Paul's brain leave his body, which fell limp to the ground. Paul is down. Panic. He hadn't prepared for what this would actually look and feel like. This is all wrong. He turns toward Maggie, who's screaming. She backs into the cart. He fires. It hits the ground. Paul hadn't seen it coming, but Maggie has now. The element of surprise is gone. She continues backing up. She's in front of the cart now, but they both know she has nowhere to go. He doesn't like the way she's looking at him. He doesn't like hearing her plead for her life. Doesn't she understand? He has to do this. His plan is falling to bits. He wasn't ready for this. A shot hits her wrist. He can't aim. Another one hits her leg. She's crying out, still begging, still backing up. The next shot doubles her over in pain. Why is this so hard? This is not what he planned. This is not how he saw things. He has better aim than this. If she'd just stop looking at him, pleading with him. He walks around to the back of her as she's down on her hands and knees on the ground, and he fires again. She's down. He can't be too sure this time, though, after the Paul mess. He walks around to the front and delivers the final shot right into her head. In about a minute, he's carried out the murders of both his wife and his son. It's now 8:50. He has 3 minutes. If that sounds far-fetched to you, stand up, act this part out. He checks their bodies, makes sure they're really dead. With their injuries, it's not hard to know that. They're not so far apart from each other. Doesn't take long. He strips off his protective gear, puts it in the bags that he's already brought. He doesn't really need to rinse anything since I believe he's pretty covered, but the hose is out as we heard in the cache video, so maybe he rinses something. He puts the bag of clothes and the guns in the cart. He doesn't even have to bag the guns. He's not worried about gun residue in the cart. It's full of it from shooting hogs and such. It's so easily explained if anyone questions. Well, we take that cart out and shoot hogs all the time. I imagine in these 3 minutes, he probably kept going back to check the bodies, just making sure they're really gone, freaked out by the fact that Paul had started to stumble out of the shed. At 8:53, he notices Maggie's phone where she dropped it. Did it have blood on it? Is that one of the reasons it changes orientation? Is he wiping it clean? He takes it with him as he drives back up to the house. It's registering 59 steps for the next 2 minutes while he's executing the next step in his plan. Why did he pick it up? Why did he take it with him? Who knows? He's paranoid. Even though he's sure she didn't, what if she got a call out? What if she texted something about him? He turns it on. The camera doesn't recognize his face, so it doesn't unlock. He knows better than to open it, even though he has her password. 8:55:48. Maggie's phone is swiped up to the home screen, and this is explained in the report, where it says, 8:55:48 p.m., Maggie Murdoch's iPhone took a snapshot of an open app, which was Facebook, that was running in the background. Phone will take random snapshots of accesses that are open when you change apps or swipe up for the home screen. So this is how we know he was holding her phone and swiped it up. Would 2 random vigilante murderers care about what's on Maggie's phone? If they want anyone's phone, they want Paul's phone. There's a lot of rumors going around about Paul at this time. People are saying he killed Gloria. People are saying he had something to do with the murder of Stephen Smith. People are mad at him about the boat crash. Maybe he's confessed something in the boat crash. There's a million reasons to want Paul's phone. There are 0 reasons to be interested in Maggie's phone. Now, the next 7 minutes of Alex's time is unaccounted for since he puts Maggie's phone down and doesn't pick his up yet. He is stressed, heart racing, adrenaline pumping, a quick rinse in the shower to make sure nothing is left on him. Even though I believe he wore protective clothing, you can't be too careful. 9:02:18, his phone starts registering steps again. Frantic steps. 2.5 football fields worth of steps. He's dressed now in the white t-shirt and shorts that he'll be wearing when he calls 911. Blanca finds clothes knocked off the shelf the next day, showing he was frantic while grabbing his clothes. For extra measure, his blue shirt, tan pants, shoes, even socks and underwear will be thrown in the evidence bag. You can't be too careful. They are never seen again. 9:03:44, something triggers his SUV. Did he open the back gate or the back door? For 2 minutes, he's racking up the steps, showing a lot of fast movement. I think he was putting a tarp in and loading the back with guns and his clothes. 9:03:52, Maggie's backlight comes on. He's holding her phone. He wants to swipe up again, but he doesn't dare. Holding her phone in one hand, he dials his phone in the other. His hands are shaking. It takes longer than usual. He has to make sure his calls go through. The call connects. Her light-up response happened before he made the call. So this wasn't a light-up responding to a call notification. He turned it on, made the call. He hears the ring, feels the vibration, watches his name come up on her phone. She'll never answer his call again. He sits holding her phone until the ringing stops. He's still on the move, registering steps. 9:05:56. The car finally starts. Once inside the car, he continues to fiddle with Maggie's phone. He calls her a couple more times, 3 times total. Now, if this were real life, and he's wondering why she's not answering, why not drive down to the kennels? It's literally less than a minute. At 9:06:50, almost a full minute after starting the car, he puts the car in gear and leaves Moselle. Now, I want to say again that him claiming he went up to the house, left them there, took a nap, and then the murders happened, it's ridiculous. As I said earlier, there's not a chance that he heard 8 shots from his own family hunting rifles and didn't recognize the sound. They were avid hunters. Shots from an AR can be heard up to 2 miles away. This was flatland, no buildings in the way, drivable on a dirt road in 1 minute by car and 2 on the cart. It's not far away. 9:08:36, a minute and a half into the drive, he's still going fairly slowly, only about 42 miles per hour. Now, it's not really slow, but compared to the rest of the drive, much slower. At 9:08:42, he passes the place Maggie's phone is later discovered and immediately speeds up from 42 to 45 miles per hour, and the speed continues to increase from there to reaching a max speed of 74.4 and an average speed of over 50 miles an hour. Part 2 will pick up with Alex arriving at his parents' house, the time he spends there, and his return home to Moselle. Till then, this is Cassidy O'Connell saying stay well and stay tuned.